Besides coming up with the idea for Aster, I drew the concept art, I drew the actual art, the character design. I wrote the script for the cutscenes, I designed the city layouts, and provided overall direction for what the game should be.
Well, for the actual recording part of what I do, I used an H2N Zoom recorder. It's a really good handheld recorder. I used a windshield as well. Some of them I recorded right at my own workplace. I work at a lumber yard, so it was easy to get some sound effects of board falling over, something like that. There was also a few warehouses I got from there as well. Some of the effects I recorded in my own house inside my closet, since there's a bunch of clothes to absorb all the reverb, like some of the flashlight sounds, some of the spray can effect sounds, and some of them I just recorded right in my kitchen, like a bunch of cans falling on the ground. For writing the songs, I used Pro Tools 11. I used the built-in instruments in Expand, and I used placing different MIDI blocks to essentially write all the songs. So I would double click, it would create a note, I'd adjust the length, adjust the volume, and adjust the pitch. And I also use Pro Tools 11 to adjust some of the sound effects I recorded as well, to make sure they're not too loud or not too ear-piercing.
So I use Blender to make the models. In Blender, there's a thing called modifier, and I use the Boolean modifier and array modifier a lot to create like the windows or the walls, because like I have to make the walls cube instead of just like a face, like a plane. I mean it's kind of hard to make very complete building in the short time, so I try to keep it simple and recognizable.
For Yukon, I had him export buildings as FBX files so that way I could import them into the Unreal Engine, and then once in there, I would choose the materials and the textures. In terms of the sound and the music, what I have is essentially you create a trigger box, and depending on certain sound that plays in a certain area, you create the trigger box. When the character actually reaches that area and starts to actually walk onto the area, then you actually have that specific sound play. So what I did for Gina was I told her to make 2D simple layouts of what a city should be like. And what I did was I looked at those and I used them as reference. So when I pulled in Yukon's buildings, I knew kind of where to generally set certain buildings and have key points. The blueprints feature in Unreal Engine to do visual coding. So instead of actually sitting there and typing C++, they actually have this really cool thing called blueprints, where you actually get to see nodes and you connect nodes depending on the types of functions that you're using. So what I did was I essentially created every mechanic that you see in the game using the visual blueprints, which is a little bit easier for me. I have less experience using code. So in terms of the character that you're actually controlling and you're playing as, what I did was I took the original top-down controller that they had, and I kind of had to do some modifications there. So what I actually ended up doing was I looked at the movement speed and kind of had to adjust that, as well as the camera angle. From the beginning, the camera angle was really close up, and it kind of didn't really give you a field of view. And what I really wanted to do was kind of give a larger range of view, just because if you're going to be playing a puzzle game and you kind of have to time your movements, it only makes sense to be able to see a little bit more of the map. The AI that you see in the game is also something that I created. I used the visual blueprints, I used the nodes, but the idea was to have two separate types of AI. You have NPCs, which are non-player characters, and they were generally just the characters that you saw kind of walking around the cities, not really interactive. And then I created the patrols. The patrols actually have a perception. They have visual and they have hearing, but we didn't implement any sound into you walking, so the actual patrols wouldn't hear you coming around the corner, but they do still have the visual perception. So if they would see you within their range, they would go and chase you, and they would, if they actually, essentially they would tag you. You get a little prompt in the top corner, but you get caught and essentially you restart the level. What is Aster about?
Aster is a game about rescuing refugees.
fell backwards, baby. Come here.
So that way I kind of knew where to lead the character and how to do certain character character that you're controlling in the way that.
Howdy.
You think I'm good?
Yep.
Yeah? Woo!